Little Bear's Search for the Pumpkin. On a moonlit autumn night, with a fine layer of frost on the ground, Little Bear followed his dad up the hill to find a big pumpkin. Mama Bear was at home, waiting to make a big pot of pumpkin soup. Little Bear sang loudly, "We're going to harvest pumpkins, the biggest in the world." They arrived under a walnut tree, and suddenly, Little Bear challenged his dad to a strength contest. They would see whose strength was greater, and the winner would carry home the biggest pumpkin. Little Bear stood on his head and said, "My strength is this big." Dad Bear reached for a high tree branch, and with a good shake, the tree rustled, sounding like a fierce wind blowing, and walnuts rained down, landing at Little Bear's feet. Dad Bear said, "My strength is this big." Little Bear was amazed and opened his mouth wide. Dad's strength was truly incredible. "My strength is even bigger." Dad Bear lifted Little Bear over his head. Little Bear, seizing the opportunity, started tickling his dad's armpits, making him laugh. His dad's laughter made him lose all his strength, and he sat on the ground, out of breath. Little Bear shouted, "My strength is greater than Dad's." Dad Bear, in return, tickled Little Bear's armpits, making him giggle and roll on the ground. He said, "Dad's strength is greater. No one has greater strength than Dad." Dad Bear's strength was the greatest in the world, and he raised Little Bear, placing him on his shoulders, and continued walking. Little Bear sang, "We're going to harvest pumpkins, the biggest in the world." They reached a hill covered in pumpkins. Pumpkins were everywhere. But despite searching for a long time, they couldn't find the biggest pumpkin. Frustrated, Little Bear asked his dad, "Where is the biggest pumpkin?" Dad Bear just uncovered a bunch of pumpkin leaves. Little Bear rushed to the front but didn't find the biggest pumpkin. Dad shook his head, and Little Bear followed suit. They searched many times without success, and Dad Bear sighed. Little Bear sighed too. "Wow, what a huge pumpkin!" Dad Bear shouted as he uncovered a large pumpkin. Little Bear ran over and looked, but it wasn't the biggest pumpkin. Dad laughed. "What a huge pumpkin!" Dad Bear exclaimed as he uncovered another bunch of pumpkin leaves. And Little Bear ran over again, but it wasn't there either. "You're kidding? You're kidding?" Little Bear got angry. "What a huge pumpkin!" Dad shouted, and Little Bear ignored him. Finally, when Dad lifted the leaves, revealing a very large pumpkin, Little Bear smiled. Little Bear immediately hugged the big pumpkin, and there was also a little pumpkin nearby. Dad Bear said, "I'll take the big pumpkin, and you can have the little one." Little Bear shook his head and said, "You take the little pumpkin, and I'll carry the big pumpkin." Little Bear hugged the large pumpkin and sang, "We've harvested a big pumpkin, the biggest in the world. At home, we only have one pot, so the big pumpkin and the little pumpkin stay together, bubbling in the big pot." Dad Bear and Little Bear's search for the big pumpkin teaches us that we should learn to cooperate, just like Dad Bear and Little Bear. They learned the value of working together, successfully harvesting the large pumpkin and enjoying the rewards of their cooperation. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Find more story for kids.